You'd be happy to send your child back to school from the 1st of June. Brexit, a big week of negotiations last week that ended up on Friday with, well, almost no agreement at all from what I can see. And Monsieur Barnier not wanting to change his position one iota. And the chief negotiator, David Frost, for the United Kingdom, saying we will not budge. The arguments are over, not just fishing policy, but also this concept of a level playing field. And, you know, the European Union are ideologically in support that everybody should have the same laws, ultimately even the same taxes. And the argument is that we can't be different because geographically we're so close to them. And the counter-argument that's coming from David Frost, and he's making it, actually, I have to say quite passionately, is that we're an independent state, and therefore we make up our own minds on these things. Well, a lot of voices over the last few weeks have said, look, we've got the COVID-19 crisis. We've got to focus on that. We absolutely must have an extension to this transition period into 2021 and beyond. And we're told again and again that that is the reasonable thing to do. Well, a new organisation called the Centre for Brexit Policy has put out a report today. And I'm joined by Sammy Wilson, an old friend of the programme, DUP MP for East Antrim. Sammy, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So the first question my listeners are going to ask themselves is, what the hell is the Centre for Brexit Policy?
Well, it's a think tank which has been set up to ensure that, first of all, we see through the project of leaving the European Union, that we give advice and we draw on huge areas of expertise from economists, people with knowledge about trade negotiations, etc., to give advice to the government and direct the way forward, and also to look at how, once we have properly left the EU at the end of this year, we can adopt policies which will give us the best advantage when it comes to exploiting the opportunities which being outside the EU gives us in terms of trade with other countries across the world. And don't forget, Nigel, and you will know the arguments very well, our period as members of the EU have been disadvantageous to the country in terms of heavy regulation, protection, exclusion from other fast-growing markets in the rest of the world. And the point of the think tank which was set up is to look at how we can exploit all of the things that we weren't able to exploit inside the EU once we've left on the 30th or at the end of this year. And of course it's important, very important, given the huge task which there's going to be to recover from the economic consequences of this COVID crisis, that we are in the best position to exploit those opportunities with other parts of the world to grow our private sector, to grow our trade, to bring in the kind of revenue that the government's going to need to offset the huge deficits which have incurred as a result of this health crisis.
But it looks unlikely, Sammy, I mean, who's to say, but it looks unlikely that between now and the end of June there is going to be an agreement with Monsieur Barnier. I mean, he is absolutely ideologically set on his position, as indeed is David Frost with his. Now, you know, there could be an 11th hour compromise. I don't know. But if we're to leave the European Union and the government now call it the Australian model, those that oppose Brexit will, of course, call it no deal. The argument out there, and you've been hearing it for weeks, is that given we've got problems already, leaving with no deal would be a cliff edge. It would be a disaster.
Well, of course, it wouldn't be a cliff edge because we've already had 3 attempts at leaving the EU, preparing businesses for leaving the EU without a deal. The arrangements have been well put in place. Firms are well aware, and the government's well aware of the kind of issues which we would have to address. And anyway, if we left the EU without having struck a formal free trade arrangement with them, we would leave them on WTO terms. Now, the rest of the world trades with the EU on WTO terms, and some of them under WTO terms have actually increased their trade far more with the EU, as the paper points out, than what we have been able to do. Our rate of growth with other countries in the world that we trade on WTO terms with is 6 times higher than our rate of growth of trade with the EU. So, I don't think that we need worry about that because there still will be trade will take place, and it will take place perhaps in even more favourable terms than we have at present.
What do the great British public make of this? I mean, how do they feel about extension or about just getting this done, whatever?
Well, I think that first of all, we've got to remember that the public voted 4 years ago to leave the EU. And 4 years on, we still have not fully left, and Brexit is not done. But if you look at the survey results, and we did try to back this paper up with survey results done by Comres for us, and most of the voters said that those who responded said that we should not be extending, that extending would probably be more favourable to the EU, and that the extension period that we had at present was long enough.
So the pressure is there on Boris Johnson, particularly among Conservative voters.
Conservative voters, nearly 2/3 of Conservative voters said that there should not be an extension of the period. Okay. And I think that should be a very clear message to the Prime Minister, who, don't forget, campaigned on the basis that we would leave the EU, we would get Brexit done, we would get it done by the end of this year. And I think that he has to honour the commitments to those people. But leaving aside, Nigel, honouring the commitments to people who put their trust in the Conservative Party, the paper shows, and it's a very lengthy paper, and don't forget it has been written by people who have huge expertise in these areas. The real benefit is not just the political benefit of honouring the commitment. The real benefit is ensuring that we are better placed at the end of this year to deal with the huge economic crisis that has been brought upon us by the actions we've had to take to deal with this health crisis.
Yep. Sammy, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and come back to us in the next few weeks and we'll talk about where Northern Ireland will be left in all of this as July the 1st approaches. Thank you. That was Sammy Wilson, DUP MP, Director for the Centre for Brexit Policy, and that polling shows by 2 to 1 Conservative voters don't want extension, and this matters for Boris. Don't forget, Theresa May enjoyed considerable support until March the 31st, 2019 came along, and then her support fell off a cliff. Boris needs to deliver with his own voters. Back to this important